He was on the phone with his dad for 47 minutes. 47 minutes of his dad listening to him walk through the dark trying to find his car. 47 minutes of his dad staying calm, telling him it would be okay. And then, mid-sentence, Brandon Swanson said a single word. The call didn't drop. His dad stayed on the line and shouted Brandon's name for the next hour. Brandon never answered. He was never seen again. It's May 14th, 2008. Brandon Swanson is 19 years old, a college student from Marshall, Minnesota, the kind of small town where everybody knows your name and the roads go flat and straight for miles in every direction. That night, he'd been at a party in a town called Canby. Around midnight, he got in his car to drive home. Somewhere on those long, dark country roads, he drove into a ditch. He wasn't hurt, the car was stuck, but he was fine. So he did what any kid would do. He called his parents. His mom and dad agreed to come pick him up. Brandon told them he'd start walking toward the lights he could see in the distance and meet them along the way. That's when the 47-minute call began. Here's where it starts to get strange. Brandon told his dad he could see the lights of Lind, a town about 4 miles from where he ditched the car. His parents drove toward Lind to meet him, but when they got there, no Brandon. They drove the route. They called out the window. Nothing. So here's what investigators later discovered. Brandon wasn't anywhere near Lind. When they found his car the next day, it was outside of Taunton, 12 miles in the opposite direction. Brandon had been completely disoriented in the dark. He thought he was walking toward one town. He was actually walking away from everything. And while all of this was happening, while his dad was driving toward the wrong town, Brandon was walking alone into the dark, and his dad was still on the phone with him, listening. During those 47 minutes, his dad said the conversation was completely normal. Brandon wasn't scared. He wasn't slurring his words or acting strangely. He was just walking, describing what he saw, wondering where the road would take him. And then, at 12:57 a.m., Brandon said one word. Depending on who's retelling this story, that word is reported as an expletive, like he'd suddenly seen something or stumbled or been startled. And then the line went silent. His dad didn't hang up. He stayed on the call, calling Brandon's name for another hour. The line was open. There was no background noise, no struggle, no splash, just silence. When search parties went out the next morning, they found his car, his belongings, and a set of footprints that led to the edge of the Taunton Ditch Creek and then stopped. Brandon was gone. Now here's what makes this case so haunting and so frustrating. The area around that creek was searched extensively. Dogs, divers, volunteers. They combed the banks. They searched the water. Nothing. Not a jacket, not a shoe, not a trace. And that's when people started asking harder questions. Could he have fallen into the water and been swept away? Possibly, but the creek was described as relatively shallow and narrow, and with a 47-minute phone call as a timeline, investigators had a fairly precise picture of where he was and when. Could someone have picked him up? Also possible. But his last word, that sudden exclamation, didn't sound like a greeting. It sounded like surprise. Could he have walked away intentionally? His family says absolutely not. There were no signs of depression, no reason to disappear, no withdrawn bank accounts, no contact with anyone afterward. And then there's this. Brandon was listed as a runaway at first, not a missing person. That classification delayed the formal investigation by days. Brandon's parents, Brian and Annette, refused to let their son become a forgotten headline. They spent years fighting for a change in Minnesota law, and they got it. In 2009, Brandon's Law was signed. It requires law enforcement to immediately classify missing adults as endangered missing persons under certain circumstances, eliminating the waiting period that had cost them precious time. It's since influenced similar legislation in other states. But here's the thing, that victory didn't bring Brandon home. His parents still don't have answers. His case is still open, and every lead that's emerged over the years, reported sightings, tips, new searches, has ended the same way. with silence. It's been more than 15 years. So what actually happened to Brandon Swanson? The theories fall into a few camps. The most commonly accepted one is accidental drowning. He was disoriented, it was dark, the terrain around that creek was uneven. One wrong step, the current or conditions may have carried his body further than the initial searches covered. It happens, and the evidence, limited as it is, points in this direction. But then there's a second theory: foul play. The sudden exclamation at the end of the call, the complete absence of any trace, the idea that someone may have been on that road at the same time. This theory has never been ruled out. And then there are the people who believe he walked away, that he stumbled into a new life. These are mostly strangers on the internet, not people who knew him. His family doesn't believe it, and the evidence doesn't support it. What's striking is that after 15 years, investigators haven't publicly committed to a definitive cause. The case remains open, which means officially no one knows. And that word, that last thing Brandon said, still haunts the people who loved him, because it means, in some form, he was still there, still conscious, still on the phone with his dad, and then he wasn't. Cases like Brandon's sit in a particular kind of dark. There's no villain to be angry at, no courtroom, no verdict. Just a 19-year-old kid who called his dad, and a dad who answered, and a stretch of Minnesota road that gave up nothing. What we're left with is a family that turned grief into legislation, a law that has almost certainly saved other families from losing days they couldn't afford to lose, and a case that quietly reminds you, sometimes the most unsettling answer is the one you never get. If you want to go deeper on this, investigators have noted there are still aspects of that night that haven't been fully explained publicly, and Brandon's family continues to ask that anyone with information contact the Lyon County Sheriff's Office, because somewhere out there, someone might know something, and a phone call, ironic as that sounds, could finally give this family the answer they've been waiting 15 years to hear. If this case stayed with you, it should. There are links in the description with more information and resources from Brandon's family. And if you've been watching for a while, you know this channel covers cases that deserve more attention than they get. If that matters to you, the subscribe button's right there. No pressure. I'll see you in the next one.